We're going to start out with a pop quiz. Raise your hand if this sounds like you. You've used the excuse, "it was on sale," as a reason to buy something. You've bought an outfit for a mildly special occasion, like a night out, only to have it never see the light of day again. Your closet is full of clothing, yet you still feel the need to buy more. Okay, no worries. You're definitely not alone. In fact, I used to be just like you. Today, I'm going to share with you all how I came to reflect on and change my relationship with clothing and shopping in general. Now, don't get me wrong. I love fashion. I love it not only from an artistic perspective, but from a sociological and historical one as well. Fashion is wearable art, and it can tell us so much about how people lived, what they valued, and what beauty meant to them. Patterns, colors, shapes, and textiles all come together to create a picture of what life was like, both practically, aesthetically, and sometimes politically. Now, I want you to imagine a small child. They're lying on a mat, gently breathing in dewy morning air. They hear quiet rustling. Through half-closed eyes, they see their sister packing up her things to go to work. She works at a clothing factory an hour away. She's a skilled seamstress, but their clothing is old, torn, and slightly too small. Every day she goes to work, not to make clothing for her family, or for herself for that matter, but for people that she's never met. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people wear the clothing that she makes, but the label does not bear her name. The people that wear her clothing don't even know that she exists. Now look down. She may have made the clothing that you are wearing right now. Fashion is a $3 trillion industry from which many people make their livelihoods. Anywhere from 60 to 75 million people are employed in the textile, clothing, and footwear sectors worldwide, meaning 1 in 100 people are involved in the fashion industry in some way, from dyeing fabric in factories to selling clothing in stores. I mean, how many of us have had a retail job, or 3? Fast fashion is a term that's used in the most literal sense. It's affordable clothing that's pushed from conception to retail availability as quickly as possible to respond to the latest trends. And while mass clothing production has been going on for a long time, fast fashion is a fairly new phenomenon that started around the 1950s and 60s. Stores that churn out new pieces weekly have hooked us into a cycle of purchasing clothing that's actually way less expensive than it should be, especially when you consider how many people's work went into their creation. So in a society where everything, lattes, housing, and education, is becoming more expensive, how is clothing becoming less expensive? It's time to start thinking about what we wear in an entirely different way. But it's not a new way of thinking. In fact, if you were at last year's TEDx, you might remember Josh Tamara Jones' amazing talk, A New Way to Think About Food. In her talk, she broadly refers to something called the good food movement, which attempts to reconnect people with their relationship with fresh, nutritious produce and advocates for buying local in a way that supports the livelihoods of local farmers and migrant workers by paying for the true cost of our food in a way that challenges racism, sexism, and classism. Now, is there a way that we can incorporate mindfulness and community-focused values into clothing like we've done with food? I think there is, and it's easier than it sounds. It starts with picking apart and questioning what we know about the current clothing industry. Now, clothing has always been resource-intensive, but fast fashion introduces a whole new host of problems. The clothing that we buy is designed to be lower quality because you aren't meant to keep them. Before, it used to be enough for us to have 2 pairs of pants, 7 shirts, and 3 sweaters, but now we're driven to have countless washes of jeans and an entire spectrum of pants, shirts, and sweaters. I mean, I've actually justified buying a shirt because it was a slightly different shade of blue. And the clothing that we justify buying is designed to be a lower quality because you aren't meant to keep them. When they wear or tear or simply go out of style, you're meant to toss them and buy more. Being mindful often requires that we take a second, take a step back, and focus on our actions. We should weigh the perceived positive and negative impacts of all the possible options before making a decision. To weigh the impacts of the decisions that we make when we shop for clothing, we can use the acronym SEC. S stands for social equity. How can a t-shirt cost $10? Why isn't the cost of all the work that went into creating the piece factored into the price that we pay? In environmental studies, this cost is called externalities, which means the true cost of the product is outsourced to other areas of the production chain. And our constant need to buy clothing for cheaper puts pressure on someone somewhere to produce more units for less money. So let's say an international brand approaches a factory owner and they request 1,000 shirts, but they're only willing to pay $100. Since the international brand can easily take their business elsewhere, the factory owner is inclined to oblige, and the cost gets pushed to the bottom of the chain, the farmers and the garment workers. Alienation is the isolation of the general public from the goods that we produce and purchase. Historically, everyone would do the necessary tasks like growing food and making clothing. But as communities became larger and more permanent, people began to share the work. So I might become a tailor to provide you with pants, and you might become a farmer to provide me with fresh produce and eggs. Over time, as trade and production practices shift, I'll have less of an idea how food is grown, and you'll have less of an idea how clothing is made. Now, imagine that on a global scale, and it's not difficult to realize that we actually have very little knowledge about where products come from, how they're made, and how those systems affect society. E stands for environmental impact. Fast fashion has an environmental impact that's comparable to the oil and agricultural industries. Polyester and other synthetic fabrics are literally made from petrochemicals. That includes that eco-friendly fabric that's made from recycled plastic. I hate to tell you, but it's not that friendly. When washed, it releases plastic microfibers that make their way into lakes, rivers, eventually the ocean, and right back onto our plates when we go for sushi. I used to be a huge advocate of using recycled plastic as fabric until I did more research. This is why I have trust issues. Eco-friendly fabrics like these cause more harm than good, but they make us feel good about our choices, and we're way less likely to ask questions. This practice is called greenwashing. This is essentially the manufacturing company's way of saying, yeah, our regular clothing is unsustainable, but look over here. It covers up the problem rather than addressing it. Materials like cotton, while not synthetic, use huge amounts of water and pesticides if it's not organic. And chemical dyeing, which is used in 90% of clothing to give us that bright color, is extremely, extremely environmentally impactful. The sheer amount of wastewater that rushes from textile plants makes chemical dyeing one of the most polluting practices of all industrial sectors. What's more, the chemical dyes, when absorbed into the skin of the workers, can cause adverse health problems. Environmental sustainability cannot just be about the health of the planet. It must be about the health of people. C stands for cost. In 2014, garment workers in Cambodia protested to have minimum wages increased from $128 to $160 US per month. The protests received brutal response from the Cambodian government, resulting in 5 deaths and 40 injuries. As of January 2017, the monthly minimum wage for garment workers has been increased to $140 US per month, which is still way lower than the living wage, which is estimated to be around $283 US per month. The fact that we are preoccupied with our own work and isolated from the work of others makes it easier to hide externalities, like labor costs, from us. Now, the key factors to keep in mind when you're shopping sustainably are social equity, how are people involved in the creation of this piece being treated, is their work being respected, and are their labor rights being upheld? Environmental impact, how is the creation of the piece, be it the fabric or the production process, affecting the environment? And C, cost, is it justified? Are the benefits and burdens of the item's production being shared fairly? Now, that's a lot of information to think about when you're browsing the aisles, and it is true. that being more mindful of your shopping habits will make shopping less therapeutic. But that's the point. Buying clothing, which has been proven numerous times to be an ineffective source of long-term gratification, has long-term impact on the world around us. So it's important to be critical of our consumption habits. Here are 3 simple ways that you can do that. Educate yourself on the environmental and social impacts of your consumption. That can be by listening to TED Talks like this, watching documentaries, or reading articles. And put that knowledge into practice the next time that you go shopping. The next time you look at that pair of pants, don't just look at it for the size, fit, and color. Look at the tag. The tag, much like the nutrition label, can tell you everything you need to know. You just need to know how to read it. So the next time you do look, don't just look at it, make sure that you look to see what it's made out of. Polyester, wool, cotton. Is it organic? Where was it made? Bonus points for pulling out your phone and looking at the manufacturing company's labor practices. And the great thing about this is that when you find something that you love that fits the criteria you're looking for, you'll be even more invested in its durability, which brings us to taking care of your clothing and learning to mend it so you can reduce your consumption. Now, how many of us have sewn a ripped article of clothing in the past 12 months? Learning to sew used to be passed down for generations and taught in schools. Learning to mend clothing can allow us to spend a little bit more on key pieces and know that we won't have to replace them 3 months later. And learning to alter clothing means that you'll have less of a reason to buy new clothes as your body changes over the years. This goes for eco-brands as well. There's no use switching excessive fast fashion consumption habits for excessive environmentally conscious consumption habits. At the end of the day, consuming sustainably means consuming less as well. The last thing you can do is think about this consumption pyramid by Sarah Lazarovic when you need to buy something. Try hosting clothing swaps with friends, or shopping at thrift stores that do good work in your community. If you can't find anything suitable, try making it. YouTube has thousands of videos outlining how to make shirts, skirts, and pants. In fact, my sister and I actually used a YouTube video to make the skirt I'm wearing right now. And there are several great sewing studios in Toronto that can help you develop basic and advanced sewing skills for practical uses. If you do need to buy something, consider supporting the work of local designers or direct trade pieces where proceeds go to artisans who've been able to maintain their beautiful traditional practices. Let's all buy less, but when we do, let's do it mindfully and make sure that we're impacting people and the environment positively. So to sum up, when shopping sustainably, we should take a second, take a step back, and consider the social and environmental impacts and costs associated with the piece. We can put this into practice by educating ourselves on how to read the labels, learning to mend clothing that we do own to increase their longevity, and supporting the work of local and traditional artisans. So for today, I'm going to leave you all with some homework. Yes, on a Saturday. When you get home, or when you go to the bathroom if you're keener, take a look at the labels on the clothing that you wore today. What's it made out of? Where was it made? Were the benefits and burdens of its creation shared fairly? And lastly, the next time you do need an article of clothing, how can you fulfill that need in a way that has a more positive impact on the world around you? Thank you.